Right, so we've got a lot to cover today, so let's dive in. My name is Charlotte Schranner. I'm the Senior Project and Program Manager at CIPD, the Chartered Institute for Personal and Development in Dubai, in the Middle East. We're still working from home, as you can see, and thank you very much for tuning in. So today, we are going to be talking about negotiation with Matthias Schranner, whom I'm about to introduce in a second. But before that, just a few housekeeping remarks. So the session is being recorded and you will receive it. Throughout the session, please do feel free, really do send us your feedback, your questions in the chat. I will pick them up at the right time during the conversation, either right away or I'll come to it later if you're already touching upon something that we're going to get into afterwards. And we're also going to use Slido. So if you don't know Slido, just use your phone or whatever device is most handy to you. Go to Slido, which I just popped the link to in the chat, and use the event code, which is on the slide, which is CIPD20. We're going to be using Slido just to ask you a few questions, as it's many of you joining us today, and getting to know you. So if you are already on Slido, the first question that we wanted to know from you is what best describes your job. So are we joined by HR and L&D professionals, or you business leaders, or are you? That'll help us better answer your questions. All right, so we are talking about negotiation today. Pop culture is full of negotiation themes, most of which are really pretty iconic, and perhaps this is what makes speaking to an FBI-trained hostage negotiator seem so intimidating. From crime drama series to Erin Brockovich to Wolf of Wall Street, the characters that are leading on negotiations in pop culture are usually presented as very tough, and the negotiations themselves can sometimes seem daunting. In real life, media headlines are often also about negotiations, but there again, they tend to be quite confrontational, from politics to business or social movements. These don't always seem to be going very smooth. So today we are going to debunk some myths behind negotiation and learn some tips specifically applicable to business and HR leaders joining us today from my guest, Matthias Schranner. So there is a lot to say about Matthias. Matthias is a negotiation expert. He's the founder of the Schranner Institute. He started his career with the German police, where he worked for 17 years. And after 6 years of working undercover in drug enforcement, he was trained by the FBI as a lead negotiator for high-stakes situations, and then transferred to a special federal criminal task force, where he was responsible for overseeing crimes such as kidnapping and hostage negotiations. For the past 15 years, he and his team at the Schranner Negotiation Institute, which he founded, have been advising governments, political parties, clients like the UN, Fortune 500 companies in over 40 countries. Well, I hope I summarized your experience well, Matthias. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So from your career in the police to advising the United Nations and Fortune 500 companies, these may seem quite different situations. What are the similarities between being a hostage negotiator and being in a business negotiation?
Well, there's one huge difference. In the business negotiation or in politics, you start a negotiation, you try to reach an agreement, and if you don't reach an agreement, you will be in this so-called deadlock situation at the end of your negotiation. As a police negotiator, you always start with a deadlock negotiation process, because if you arrive at the crime scene, there's a hostage taker, for example, with a gun in his hand, taking a gun, let's say taking someone at hostage, taking them, or telling us, if I don't get a getaway car right now, I will kill the hostage. So as a hostage negotiator, you always start with a deadlock scenario, and you need to find a way out of this deadlock scenario. And this is why our concept is based on difficult negotiations, because based on our experience, a deadlock scenario is very important in a negotiation process.
Excellent, thank you. So I know that you're going to be using some terms that are specific to negotiation. You just mentioned deadlock. So deadlock scenario is when there is no way out, is it?
There's no way out. It's like a new negotiation. You exchange ideas, you exchange options. You talked about there were proposals, but the negotiation partner is telling you no, no, no. And so you have no idea what to do. Because from a rational standpoint, you don't see a solution, you don't see an agreement. And then you end up in this deadlock scenario. Someone is coming up with a very often unrealistic demand, and you have to handle it.
Excellent. So before we get into the tactics in particular that we are going to give our attendees today, I know that part of the reason why we've had so many people today is because it's obviously a job. What you've done is it's surrounded by a lot of mystery and a lot of myths. Can you let us know? I think it's true. I think there's a lot of things that I learned from you. We learned from you all wrong, and a lot of things that are applicable in our daily life. So before we get started, could you tell us about a story, a moment in your career, a situation in which you have been in your previous life that has triggered an aha moment for you, that has been a learning point when it came to your negotiation tactics?
Yeah, there was one situation. A young woman called us telling us, my neighbor killed himself in front of my eyes. So we arrived at the scene. So I had in mind, okay, we will find the dead neighbor. And so my expectation was, entering this house, we will find the dead body of this neighbor, because she informed us my neighbor killed himself in front of my eyes. We entered this house, and a guy was shooting at me with a gun in his hand, and he went back into a room. I entered this room, and there was a hostage sitting on a sofa. He took her at gunpoint and told me, "Get out of here, otherwise I will kill her." So this was very unique, because usually as a hostage negotiator, you negotiate over the phone. And in this situation, I was standing in the room in front of this guy with this gun, and this was a pretty dangerous situation.
Yeah, I can just, Matthias, I'm hearing from some people that your mic is not completely clear, so if there is a way that you can help us with that, that would be great. Well, just a good transition from this story. Negotiation has become quite a hot topic recently, and a YouTube ad for a very famous online workshop with a famous person in your field starts with, from crossing a street to getting your coffee at Starbucks, everything in life is a negotiation. Do you agree with this statement?
Well, it depends. From let's say daily business standpoint, this is a negotiation because you want something. From our standpoint, it's not a negotiation, because based on our experience, negotiation is starting if you don't have an alternative. So if you do have a lot of alternatives, like if I don't get this coffee from Starbucks, I will choose another coffee shop, then it's easy. A negotiation, a tough negotiation, is always based on the fact that there's just one negotiation partner. Like in hostage taking, I can't say to my hostage taker, if I don't reach an agreement with you, I will choose another partner, I will talk to someone else. And I think this is the same in your business. You have to handle a situation with your CEO or with your employee. You can't say, if you don't reach an agreement with them, I will choose another one. So based on our concept, if you don't have an alternative, then you have to negotiate.
Great. So I think that was really helpful defining this. Earlier when you were talking about, right before the microphone mishap, where you were talking about your experience with that specific situation, you said normally it doesn't happen this way. You don't get into the room and start the negotiation. So So when does negotiation start, and how does it typically start for somebody who is looking to gain somewhere or needs to negotiate, whether it is today we're joined by mostly HR professionals, so whether you're negotiating with your CEO executive team, not agreeing with one of their decisions, or whether you're agreeing with employees and often having to try and find a balance. But first of all, where does it start and when does it start, the negotiation?
A negotiation starts if someone is asking for something or if you want to get something. So it's always you have a demand and they want to give it to you, then you have to negotiate. And this is what a lot of people, what they don't realize, that the negotiation starts very early and there is a conflict. So a negotiation is about solving a conflict. It's not about convincing your negotiation partner. So it's so important to know that in a negotiation, the target is not to convince your negotiation partner. I can't convince, let's say, a hostage taker. I can't convince Boris Johnson in the Brexit negotiation. I can't convince Mr. Trump. This is not possible. This is why I shouldn't try it. And it's also in your business. You should not try to convince your negotiation partner. The target is not convincing them. The target is to reach an agreement to solve this conflict. So what's very important, and this is what you need to keep in mind from our perspective, in a negotiation, you should not try to convince them. You should not use an argument. Because if you come up with an argument, you will receive a counter-argument. This is not a negotiation. You need to come up with a demand. You need to tell them what you want to start the negotiation. If they want something from you, you're in the negotiation process. And then you should not come up with an argument, and definitely you should not justify your position.
Absolutely. So I ask the audience to share some ideas, words that they associate with the word negotiation. What's the first thing that comes to their mind? And so while a lot of people are kind of going in a direction, we're going to get into this, they're saying give and take, psychology, compromise, agreement. We are seeing quite a few people saying tough. So I think there is that idea that to be a negotiator, you have to be strangely enough, you have to be uncompromising and tough. Can negotiation be learned, and can anybody, even someone who is a bit more risk averse, be a good negotiator?
Definitely, and what you describe is tough. It's so interesting because as you described it previously, all the movies about negotiation, about police negotiation, all the TV shows, you get the impression as a hostage negotiator, you are a tough guy, no compromise, always a gun in your inside pocket, threatening the other one. This is not the reality. As a hostage negotiator, you need to find a solution with someone who is not very professional and is always under a huge pressure. So what you can learn from a hostage negotiator is how to find a way out of a deadlock scenario. So how to find a way to get this guy out of this deadlock situation and to find a solution. And this is what you can learn. So there are some principles, there are some written and unwritten rules in a negotiation, like you never commit yourself at the beginning. So you never say no. You never say but. You never come up with an argument. You never justify your position. A negotiation is you need to slow it down and you need to talk to them in a very calm way. There's a lot of noise in here, right? There's a lot of noise. Can you hear it, or is it just an...
I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, good. So, in summary, yes, you can learn it. You need to know the most important written and unwritten principles, and then it's quite. I think then you can solve almost every conflict and every issue.
Interesting that we're talking about conflict. A lot of people, especially people professionals in HR, tend to want to please. Well, we want to please both parties. We want to avoid conflict. This is often a question that is raised when it comes to workplace culture. So, is conflict does negotiation necessarily have to create or have to do with conflict?
Well, what is the alternative if there is a conflict? So if a situation where you get the feeling you want something, you need something, if you try to avoid the conflict now, it will come back. So based on my experience, if you avoid a conflict, you have to face a much more difficult conflict later on. Yeah? Because, if you don't negotiate, you always send a clear signal to your negotiation partner. If you avoid a conflict, you send two signals. Number one, I'm in a very weak position because I'm afraid. And number two, I don't care. Yeah? So I'm not interested in a long-term oriented partnership with you. I don't care. So avoiding a negotiation, a lot of people believe it's not that bad. It is very bad, very, very bad. Because if you avoid it, you send this signal, I don't care. You're not important. Yeah.
Some great tips here. So never justify, never say no, never say but, slow down, remain calm, and try to understand the arguments of the other party. This is something that I wanted to get into with you because from what I read about negotiation, what we know about negotiation, there seems to be, it's a lot about compromise, understanding, empathy, which is also something that we've seen during the crisis to be a very important quality for leaders, to have this empathetic leadership and vulnerability. How do you strike that balance between having to be empathetic and understanding of your other party, but also coming up strong enough, if I understand correctly, to get where you want to go?
That's a very important and interesting question. And so what is empathy? Empathy means I try to understand the other party, which is important to reach an agreement. On the other side, very often it's an excuse to avoid a negotiation. And a lot of people, they say, okay, I understand what you want. This is why I offer you a compromise or I give in. And this is wrong. Empathy doesn't mean that you don't need to negotiate. It's just one part of the negotiation. So understanding the other negotiation partner, putting yourself in their shoes, try to find the motive. It's important. And it's also important to focus on your target. So what do you want? And so this is what I have learned during this COVID-19 crisis. A lot of negotiators, they use this empathy as an excuse for not negotiating with their partners, with their stakeholders. You shouldn't avoid a negotiation. Very important. Empathy, just one part, but it's not the most important part. The most important part is what's your target and how to reach the target.
So let's go into the principles of negotiation before. So as you're preparing for your negotiation, you're talking about the target. So I suppose it's about defining exactly what your demand is. What else would you recommend to somebody who is about to get into a negotiation to ensure they have everything on their side?
So very important is that you formulate and describe your target. So what do I want to achieve? Yeah. What you should not do, you should not focus on what could they want. So what we see very often in business, that you negotiate with yourself, but not with your negotiation partner. So you think about what could it be? Could it be interesting for them? Oh no, last time they did say no. So a lot of people, they negotiate with themselves instead of negotiating with the other partner. So in summary, prepare what's important for you. Don't prepare what could be important for them.
So that's a little bit counterintuitive, because I would tend to think if I'm going to negotiate with you, I'm going to try and prepare things, elements that please you to be able to reach my goal. Why shouldn't we? Can you just elaborate a little bit why I shouldn't do that?
Well, that's an interesting statement from you. Why do you want to please me? What's your target? There is one question which you need to answer is, do you want to be loved or do you want to be respected? So if you want to be loved, you have to do something. You have to give in, you have to offer compromise, you have to please me. If you want to be respected, then you need to show me that you are a trustworthy, reliable negotiation partner. You need to be on eye level. Yeah? And this is very often in business that C-level guys that they don't accept HR because they don't present themselves as a respected partner. And respect, it's not granted. You have to fight for it. Yeah? So, and the best way to gain respect is to start a negotiation, because you show your negotiation partner, I'm here. Yeah? You need to see me. I'm important for this company. Let's negotiate. Very important. It might sound a little bit tough. Yeah? Very important. If you talk about strategies and tactics, the tone is always very nice, always respectful. Yeah? And this is so important. Never mix it up. Yeah? You could play, let's say, a demanding position. It needs to be always in a very nice and respectful way. And coming back to your statement before, as a police negotiator, you need to be nice, charming, respectful. Otherwise, you won't get this respect from your negotiation partner.
Yeah, very important distinction here. So we're getting a few questions around the specificity, I guess, of business relationships. Is a relationship effect? So you want to negotiate, or you don't want, but need to negotiate with either side. And again, these are quite different stakeholders between a tougher business leader and maybe a disgruntled employee, or an employee who is asking for a raise that you can't grant that to. So you are having to have that negotiation, but also, you said that to me the other day, maintain that long-term relationship. Someone is saying in the comments, sometimes focusing on the target can damage the relationship. How do you overcome that?
Well, especially in HR, you're very often in this so-called sandwich position. Yeah? You need to negotiate with different stakeholders, and very important in your business, you're damaging a relationship is not accepted, and it shouldn't happen. So, what I have learned during the last 30 years in negotiation, if you're respectful, you will never destroy or damage a relationship. So you don't destroy a relationship with a huge target or with the high demand. You destroy a relationship with a disrespectful tone. So in other words, you can ask for everything if you're negotiating it in this respectful way. So don't worry about your target. Don't worry about the strategy. If you're nice, respectful, everything is fine.
You make it seem so easy. During the negotiation, well, that's the thing with people who master the art. During the negotiation, what are I know we are going to share with you participants a checklist with so many more elements that we could actually discuss in person. But just now to perhaps could you highlight a few important phases or elements that are critical to remember during that negotiation at the table, and then is there an after also the negotiation? I'm not sure.
It depends. So there are some tactics which you need to know. Number one is the time frame. So never start a negotiation at the coffee machine like I want to ask you something. Yeah. So always okay. I would like to talk to you about a very important topic tomorrow. Let's set up a meeting for 1 hour. So always a clear time frame. Yeah? If someone is coming up with a demand at the coffee machine, yeah, you shouldn't say okay. You shouldn't react. Huh? Just say, okay. We talk tomorrow, 1 hour. Number one. Number two, you need always a clear agenda. So what's all about? Yeah? What do you want to discuss? Number three is you need to say what you want. Yeah, you should not tiptoe around the topic. You should say, okay, this is what I want. Yeah? Very often, summarize as often as possible. It's obvious there's a conflict. So you see there are two different positions, and there's always a common interest. Otherwise, you wouldn't negotiate. What you need to summarize very often is the common interest. So why are we here? Because we want to reach an agreement. We want to exchange ideas. We want to find options, whatever. Summarize as often as possible. Yeah? And then at the end of the negotiation, you see there are some options, some packages. Summarize the packages, and then you see if it's possible to reach an agreement or not.
I'd like to share this in the chat for you. So while we're chatting, I asked the audience to give us examples of the types of negotiation they're having to deal with on a daily basis. I'm hearing a few things around conflict, but what I see a lot is having to push back on requests, not being able to say yes, managing change, of course, and then managing relationships as people are having different roles. So as you're both being the HR, but you're dealing with an employee who is also a candidate, for example, who also has different spaces. So I guess that's a lot. But are the principles that you're talking about, first of all, in your experience, applicable to every possible type of negotiation? And when you're saying state your demand, again, counterintuitive as to what most people would say. If I'm coming into the room asking for a salary raise, for example, the first natural instinct would not be to come in and say, hi, I would like to have the salary raise. It would be to say, well, over the past year, I've been doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and as a result of this, is this the wrong approach? Is this going around in circles? Would you recommend a more direct approach?
It's definitely wrong. You should never focus on the past if you want to negotiate the future. So if you have done a great job, that's fine, and you got a lot of money for it. And if you want to get more money, then you need to say what you want to do for this money. So if someone is coming up, I want more money, for example, 10% increase. So first of all, what you say. So let's say your HR and employee is asking for 10% increase. Number one, thank you. Thank you for coming up with your demand. Thank you for expressing what you want. Always thank you. We always start in a positive way. Always. We never say no. We never say it's not possible. So we never say what we cannot do. That's very important, especially during this COVID-19 crisis. We never say what you cannot do. Because if you say what you can't do, you force the negotiation process in a negative way. Number three, we always talk about common interest. Okay, we are in the same boat. We want to find a solution for this company. So, and then if they start with a demand, then you need to come up with your demand. So what do you want from them? Should they take over, let's say, a bigger team? Should they commit to more revenue, whatever? So what is your demand? And then the negotiation starts. If you say no, if you say, but you have to understand, then you put yourself in a defense position. Then you have to justify your position. And then you can't win anymore. So if someone is coming up with a demand, it's great. Because that's the best opportunity that you could come up with your demand. Very important, never negotiate the past. Also in private life, by the way. Because if you talk about the past, there are always different expectations. And there's always a lot of disappointment. So if you talk about the past, you will always start an emotional negotiation. And handling emotions in a negotiation, that's very difficult.
Well, you've given me a great segue because we've got a question. Thank you for that. We've got a question on emotions. How do you handle emotions? You might do your best to avoid becoming emotional yourself, but very often these conversations may become unpleasant for the other party if they're not willing to see your side. What role does it play in a negotiation, and are there tactics to de-escalate or turn the situation around?
Yeah, what you need to do to de-escalate is talking about common interest, as I mentioned before, and number two, don't tell them that you understand them. This is very, very critical, and this is very often in HR that you say to your opponent party, "Oh, I can understand you." Yeah, and that's wrong because you can't understand the situation. It's not possible. Yeah? You know, if I talk to someone committing suicide, oh, I understand you, then they will jump, because you don't have the right to tell them that you understand them, because you can't. So never say, I can understand you, I can understand your situation. What you could do, if you're a highly trained and really professional negotiator, you could say, okay, I understand your feeling. You are disappointed. I know this feeling as well. That's possible. So, because a situation is unique, you can't understand it. A feeling is more in general. So you could say, well, you're disappointed, or you're angry. I understand this feeling. This is possible.
It's September, so it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and I think you're giving us a great lesson on empathy, whatever the situation. So never pretend to say that you understand the situation unless you genuinely have been in that situation, and that is public knowledge, or that you're willing to talk about it. And instead, it's about acknowledging that feeling. So the other thing that we are seeing, and I'm trying to pick up on some questions from the audience. Okay. So the first thing to finish on emotions. So you're saying never make that conversation emotional, and that again can seem quite interesting, because what we are seeing in these tough negotiations is that it seems sometimes that we're trying, and especially in the Middle East, and sometimes it can feel as though we're trying to make the conversation emotional in order to gain sympathy or from the other party.
It's possible if you can control yourself. You can do whatever you want if you can control yourself. The issue is that if a negotiation partner is let's say, pushing your button, if they see your weakness, if they force you into this emotional discussion, then you get nervous, and then you make mistakes. Yeah, and there are two mistakes in an emotional negotiation. There are the so-called fight types. They start talking, and then they talk too much. They uncover all the information, and they very often they end up with a threat. Yeah, and we have the flight types. They leave the room. They avoid the conflict, and that's always negative. So, you know, based on my experience, you should not negotiate in an emotional way, because it's so difficult to handle it. If you're very professional and if you can control yourself, fine. Then you can do it. Otherwise, it's too. From my perspective, it's definitely too dangerous.
Great question. I'm going to get into some questions that we are getting now into the chat. We're also trying to cover everything we've promised. You again said, I think it seems that many of us are getting negotiation wrong from this conversation, at least. And you just said earlier, when you were giving the example of the salary, don't talk about the past. Don't say what you've done, which is just the, I guess, instinctive thing to do, and ask for that raise. What is an example? Can you give us an example in your career of a moment that has shaped your understanding for the future of negotiations, the situation in which it might have been?
Well, it's always about the future, and the question is always, and you mentioned at the beginning, it's give and take. Yeah? So, and if you want something, you need also to ask yourself, what can you give? Yeah? And this is also during the preparation is, what is your so-called zone of possible agreement? What could you offer? Yeah? So you need some we call it playground, where you can play your game. Yeah? If you have just one demand, like coming back to my example, let's say getaway car, or I will kill the hostage. If there's just one demand, it's not a negotiation, it's a power struggle. So you need more demands, you need a bigger playground to move a little bit, to maneuver it a little bit. Otherwise, it's a power struggle, and this is what we see in politics right now. Yeah, you know, this Brexit negotiations, for example. Yeah, it's from a negotiation perspective, it's not very smart, because it looks like a power struggle. Yeah, and this is always, you know, you won't get a good result. because at the end it will be a threat and a counter threat, and then we will have a lot of negative consequences.
I think that's right. So redefining negotiation, whenever there is only one option, it is not a negotiation. It's not a negotiation. It's putting the person in a deadlock situation and making it actually a non-negotiable. So if I come and say, I need you to accept a lower salary this month, or we'll have to let you go, that leaves no room for negotiation. Is that correct? It becomes a power struggle.
Well, if you would come up with this demand, then you offer some cooperation. If you would just send me an email, then it's not a negotiation. Yeah? But if you want to talk to me, then I know you want something from me, and then I would come up with my demand. Okay, what's possible? I try to find out what could be an option. Yeah? So I think this is what we need to keep in mind. If someone starts a negotiation, if someone is talking to you, they want something from you. Even if it's a signature. If they don't negotiate with you, like sending an email, this is what it is, then it's not a negotiation.
You mentioned a few examples. We have a question that I think many of us can relate if we have seen a few debates in the news recently. Someone is asking, well, yes, it'd be great to talk, but the other party won't hear anything or won't talk. I assume you have studied over the years the current US president's strategy. Can you come around to negotiating with somebody who doesn't want to negotiate and doesn't want to hear you?
Sure. So this debate, this was not a negotiation, it was a debate. And in a debate, you don't want to, you are not trying to reach an agreement. You try to show the audience that you're a hardball negotiator, great guy. And what Joe Biden did then, which was a huge mistake from my perspective, he jumped in Mr. Trump's sandbox using the same tactics. And I think it was negative for both parties because I don't want to see a president shouting at each other. The other question is, if they don't listen to you, if they don't want to negotiate, then you need to ask yourself, you have two options. Number one, you can offer something which is beneficial for them. So you have something to give, and now it's getting really interesting, the disagreement for the other party is better than an agreement. So if they don't negotiate with you, then they believe a disagreement is better than an agreement. And what you need to do, you need to increase the price for the disagreement. So the disagreement needs to be more expensive than the agreement. So what you need to do, you need to accept it's a power struggle, and then you need to increase the pressure on the other side to move them into a negotiation. And then it's very complicated, because then you need additional stakeholders, you need social media, whatever. You need to increase the pressure on the other side. Otherwise, they won't talk to you. If they don't listen to you, then you talk too much. So slow down and stop talking, and then they will also stop talking.
The power of silence.
Yep.
I think one tip that I was hearing from you in what you were saying the other day is often we see in negotiations or conversations that one of the parties isn't actually answering the question. We see this a lot, and one could say, it could actually get really upsetting if you're the person who's not being answered to. Well, what I heard you say is, well, you don't have to answer the other party's question. Play your game, play your script to get to where you need to. Can you elaborate a little bit on this? So in the case of we are in a negotiation, the party is asking me, so what is it exactly what price are you looking for right now? It is not in my interest to answer the question. Why should I continue to play by my script? And what is going to happen if I don't answer the question? Should I fear that they're going to ask it again?
Okay, so very important. What we need to separate. We need to separate a discussion or a private discussion from a negotiation. Yeah? At home, if my kids are asking me, "Dad, can I?" Of course, I will answer a question. Yeah? In a negotiation, I would never answer a question, because if I answer it, I would put myself in a defensive position. So, if you ask me something like, "You want 10% more," then I would say, "Well, thank you so much for coming up with your demands and expressing what you want, and I think this is very important for us." And then I would come up with my demand. So I'm sure you're well prepared. So what could you offer me? And then, without answering your question, I put myself in a more proactive way. And this is what you need to do. You should not answer a question. You should come up with play your game. Very important. If your negotiation partner, if they don't answer your question, they are very professional. Don't underestimate them. Yeah? Then you have a master on the other side, and then it's getting interesting because you can learn from them.
Great. So I think we only have about 15 minutes to go. We have covered a lot of, I think, what we wanted to talk about today. To everyone who's in the room, I tried to pick up some of your questions. Is there anything we haven't spoken about, anything that you disagree with or agree with, or a specific example that you want us to talk about? So while I'm waiting on the participant question, what I've seen come through a few questions around sale negotiations in particular. So one tends to think classically, I need to buy a product from you. You get me what is your highest price. I'll give you a counter negotiation, and you come back to me and say, "This is my final price," or "Sorry, I can't go lower. Thank you very much. Goodbye." Or, which is what this person is asking about, where you can reverse the negotiation. We see this a lot with salary negotiations, where the person is going to come and say, "Well, what salary are you looking for?" Is it true that not answering the question, or that not giving a figure first, is putting me in a stronger position? Or what would you recommend in that specific situation?
Well, so in a price negotiation, you mentioned two difficult words. You say, "Okay, this is my final price," which you should never say. And you say, "Okay, I can't go lower." This is also a commitment. Never commit yourself. Yeah? Never ask them, what do you expect me to do? Yeah? Because then they will come up with an irrational demand. What you need to do is, okay, well, based on my preparation, I could offer you, let's say, 100 in combination with a specific volume or terms and conditions or an exit clause, whatever. So it's always the principle of reciprocity, meaning there needs always to be a combination. So if I say I want 100, it's like I want a getaway car. That's not a negotiation. So it would be great if I could get 100 if, so this is the magic word, if. I would like to get 100 if you could combine it with, let's say, double the volume. And then I start a negotiation because I opened up the room for a negotiation. You shouldn't come up with just one demand. It's can you negotiate like a hostage taker?
Yeah, exactly what you were talking about. So avoiding having a threat situation, and instead creating that room where we can have more of an exchange rather than just number counting number, negotiation is over and neither may have reached what they wanted to say. Someone is asking a question that I thought it would be important to clarify. Someone said, why is increasing the other party's disagreement important if they don't agree? And I think that's a misunderstanding from what you said earlier, Matthias. You said, if I want to be convincing, I think you said, tell me if I understood this correctly, I'm learning. If I want the other party to agree with me, I should make the price of disagreeing higher, meaning make it actually more difficult for them to not come to an agreement with me. Is that?
Exactly. This is exactly what I said. And so always keep in mind, if they don't want to negotiate this deal, you need to find out why do they believe why do they believe they don't need an agreement? Or if they try to avoid a disagreement, if they avoid a negotiation, very often they believe they can get a better deal later on. And this is what we see very often in business negotiations, that the negotiation partner, that they don't come to the table, they're waiting. Yeah. If someone, so it's a difference. If they say, no, I don't want to negotiate with you, then you have to increase the price for disagreement. If they avoid a decision, so they are still in this pending situation, then they believe they will get a better deal later on. That means you came up with a proposal without a timeline. So you offer something, but you didn't combine it with a timeline. So they got the feeling, okay, let's wait a little bit, because there is no need to reach an agreement right now. Let's wait a little bit. So very, very important. If your negotiation partner, if they try to avoid this negotiation, you made a huge mistake. You presented a proposal without a timeline. Yeah? So, and if it doesn't expire, why should they act? Yeah? So always proposal, it's always combined with a timeline.
Just like a job offer or a sale offer, very often will put urgency to close that deal and come to an agreement. A few questions around recovery. So if I haven't gotten it right, by mistake I answered the question, or I gave a figure first, or I put myself in a situation where I'm a little bit cornered, are there strategies to recover, or is it lost? Is every negotiation recoverable?
Yeah, easy. So two examples, or two options. Number one, you could say, well, I made a decision based on the information I got at this time. So let's say yesterday I decided A because yesterday it was the right decision. Because yesterday my decision was based on the information I got yesterday. Today I received the new information. This is why I made a new decision. So never justify yourself in a negotiation. Never say, "Oh, I made a mistake." Never come up with an excuse or with putting yourself in a defensive position. Also, okay, my decision yesterday was right, and my decision today is also right because based on different information. Option two, and this is very it's dangerous, but it works. You can accuse the other one that they put you in this difficult position. Like, okay, you played hardball with me. This is why you forced me into this corner. But this is very critical. It's you can do it if you're very professional, if you're completely calm, and if you can control your emotions. Because if you accuse your negotiation partner a little bit, they possibly will accuse you. If you're professional, fine. If you're not, don't do it.
And if I do recover, do I have to do it face-to-face again?
What do you mean by again?
Do I have to go back? So if I say, well, I felt a little bit pressured by you yesterday, and I said yes, but I realized that's not exactly what I wanted. Do I have to go back into that negotiation with that intimidating person? I can't do that by email, right?
No. Well, no, not by email, but by phone it's possible. But it's exactly what you said. You put me in a corner yesterday, and this is not what I want. We want an agreement here. That's brilliant. Well done. Good.
So on the agreement, and I think it will be closing arguments. Great question. So is every negotiation necessarily a win-win? It's not a win or lose.
Well, it sounds so hot to say it's win or lose. So what is win-win? Win-win is that both parties get what they want. That's win-win. Mm-hmm. In a tough negotiation, it's not possible. Because in a tough negotiation, you can't get what you want, or you can't get everything you want. You need to make concessions. The question is always, so win-win is very. It's a little bit. Let's say. Well, in other words, it's always combined with the relationship. So if I trust you and you trust me, if you do have a reliable, trustworthy relationship, then we can achieve win-win. If you want to win against me, like let's say the American president, America first, so it's obvious he wants to win, and then you shouldn't come up with win-win. Then you should say, well, he wants to win, I want to win either, so let's start a negotiation, and then the best will win. So win-win is not the target of a negotiation. Everyone needs to save face. That's important. But this is completely different. But the best will win. So a negotiation is a little bit like competition. It's a little bit like sports. If you play by the rules, you shouldn't be unfair. You shouldn't use tricks. You should use manipulation. However, winning is good. You could be the right mindset.
Again, it is true. It's important, especially for HR professionals, where sometimes we're so empathetic and forget that we also need to achieve certain things that are not negotiable for us. But also, very important distinction. It's about who I'm having the negotiation with and why. So I suppose when you're talking about the tough negotiation, where I may come out as winner because there is only one most likely outcome. Maybe that's the case with a senior executive or with the SLT or the board. Perhaps if I'm dealing with employees, I'm more trying to come to collaborative approach, and the ideal outcome might be a win-win in that case.
Exactly, and so it's all about relationship. So what I have learned, if you do have a good relationship, you will never end up in a deadlock, never. Because you will uncover your information, you will uncover your needs, you will tell them what you need, they will tell you what they need, and then it's quite easy to reach an agreement. So a deadlock means there is a lack of trust always, which is not bad, because that's business, and of course they want to win, and Mr. Trump, he wants to win. So it's not, if he is not using an unfair tactic from a negotiation perspective, it's fine.
My final question to you is around power. So we've understood the distinction between negotiation and power struggle. However, if I'm being fair, in most organizations, there is almost always some form of a power struggle. And very often you're negotiating up with someone who's way more senior to you. Do you think that these hierarchy relationships and that power relationship influence the negotiation a lot? And do you believe that it's hard? I love your tactic, but it's hard for me to believe that if I'm 10 ranks under the other guy, I have equal chances to win a negotiation. Am I wrong?
Well, so how to find out if you or the other party is in a more powerful position? How do you want to know? You can't know, because you don't know the alternative. You don't know the consequences. So if you negotiate with yourself, you always end up with this impression, I'm in a weak position, always, because you see all the negative consequences coming up in your mind, and then you say, oh my God, I'm really a poor guy. I shouldn't negotiate at all because I'm in a weak position. So again, never negotiate with yourself. Negotiate with them. If they start a negotiation, if they talk to you, then you know they need something from you. Otherwise, they wouldn't talk to you. And this is why I'm sure you're always on eye level, always. Because if they don't negotiate with you, then they might believe it's different. But if they talk to you, then you know they need you. So if someone comes up with a demand, thank you, common interest, here's my demand.
I love this because for so many reasons and in so many different contexts, there is that feeling that you may be a little more, less legitimate than the other person in the room. Mm-hmm. And actually, if you've got your seat at the table, you're invited, and it means that you may not have no power. And also, then power is relative. So in this specific context, you may hold the power for the negotiation, even though more broadly you might be less senior.
Exactly.
Well,
and it's in your mind, yeah. No. It's in your mind. It's not. It's relative, and it's just in your mind. It doesn't exist. Yeah.
Well, this is probably one of the most eye-opening discussions I've had in a really long time, even though we do host quite a few of these. I understand that I know nothing about negotiation. And I think a few of us, we might have reached somewhere in our negotiations, but for sure there is a lot of room for improvement in terms of tactics. So thank you so much, Matthias, for being our guest today. It's been really a pleasure. Sadly, we'll have to end the session for today. Everyone, so there will be a recording that will be shared with you and registered a little later this week, as well as some sort of a toolkit, a digital checklist that is provided by the Schranner Institute. The Schranner Institute provides, correct me if I'm wrong, Matthias, executive education across different functions in the business, as well as advisory, and they can negotiate on your behalf for certain negotiations internally or externally. So if you are looking to get in contact with the Schranner Institute, they do have an office in Dubai. And Matthias, you are joining us from Switzerland. So global company, feel free to join us and get in contact, of course. If you'd like to know more, please visit CIPD.ae, follow us on social media, and let us know if you'd like us to maybe host a follow-up session to this one with Matthias in a couple months' time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.